Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. Folks who quit their jobs on day one, what happened? Part 3. I was searching for a marketing job right out of college. I was in dire need of money for rent because I had just quit my previous job because of harassment. Applying to a charity job that called itself Direct Marketing and Advertising, I felt pleased with myself because I could now use my diploma to earn more than the minimum wage. I arrived for an interview in this chic contemporary office in downtown. This young man from another province started the business with the small goal of expanding it to open a second location in my city. There were merely 7 workers in this area. It's not unusual that they asked me to conduct some bonding exercises with them, but they were really excited about it. They took great pride in everything they did. Everything gave cause for celebration, even the fact that my shoes and pen match. I felt like they were just really into their work, which kinda grossed me out. They let me try things out. One of the younger guys who has worked there for a few years is shadowed by me. It's not a commercial. Door to door in rich neighborhoods, it uses a pre-written script that is strictly adhered to in order to force people to sign up for monthly charitable donations. And not taking no for an answer, even if it means having to repeat the same thing for an hour while standing there. We visited a home where the 3 children were obviously under the care of a single mother. She looked completely worn out and was clearly stressed as she opened the door. After my shadowy finished his spiel, she informed him that she was unable to sign up because she had been laid off. Ignoring her, he continued, explaining that she could help herself by helping others and comparing the cost of monthly donations to Starbucks trip costs. She shut the door on his countenance. "I hate people like that. They're obviously lying and don't care about the rest of the world," he said to me as we were leaving. Similar to Bud? We take a lunch break. I find it extremely unsettling because all I can think about is how dangerous it is to knock on doors, especially by yourself. None of them, not even the women, ever worked in teams. They were expected to force total strangers to part ways with their money alone at these strangers' homes. They continued to be incredibly enthusiastic and seemed completely unfazed. Then they tell me that I need to send them an invoice before I can be paid. They don't provide me with any paperwork, explain how it operates, how often they get paid, or advise me on tax matters. Simply, you have to invoice us for your hours. Simply sitting there, I'm thinking, WTF. I'm sent off on my own to make changes to make someone's life better, following 4 hours of shadowing. By yourself, in a neighborhood of a city I'm not familiar with. The remaining members of the team being at least 10 minutes away in various locations. I call the closest coworker during a panic attack, explain that there's a family emergency, and arrange to be picked up at the closest bus stop. The boss responded to my text message later that I was doing a great disservice to the world and that I would never find a real marketing job as good as this one and that it wasn't a good fit and that I felt uncomfortable trying to force strangers in their homes to spend money. I'm fine, family. Ignore that noise. When I had my interview at a Mitsubishi dealership about 10 years ago, the hiring manager appeared to have been attractive and sophisticated in her younger days, but was now just full of Botox and wearing clothes that were too small for her. Despite this, she was very kind and genuine. Every brand was represented at the dealership with the exception of Mitsubishi, which only had 2 Mirages and an outdated Evo. She posed 3 queries to me. Do you have a valid driver's license? 2, are weekends available for work? 3, may I begin right now? When I started the next day, she was friendly, gave me a tour of the area, asked me a few more questions, and gave me a long list of phone numbers so I could start contacting people. During one of those calls, I was asked a question by someone who entered the dealership, which, at this time of day, was fairly crowded with about 10 people strolling around. There was another manager who, according to the dictionary, epitomizes what a D-bag is. Imagine someone who never grew out of being a big shot in high school and lives on Jersey Shore with his father's money. The customer who entered the store asked me a very simple question, to which I knew the answer. My name is called by the manager I mentioned earlier, who's seated like a judge in a high chair. I asked him nicely to wait a few seconds while I completed the customer's transaction and directed him to another employee in the dealership. That's why the manager became enraged and bellowed, "When I call you, you jump, leave everything, and report to me," in front of the entire store. This effing guy, whose name I didn't know, I've never met, was my first encounter with him. I was so embarrassed at that precise moment that I went up to the woman who had hired me, thanked her for the chance, and told the guy to F off before turning around. I didn't say what I wanted to, which was to tell everyone how shady that dealership was. According to what I just looked up, it closed a few years ago. Not the first day, but about 4 months in. Worked for 14 years at a rent-to-own company. Yeah, I've made thousands of telemarketing and collection calls, seen some nasty houses, and dealt with some bitter repos. For 10 of those years, my boss was a former military health inspector and an alcoholic. In essence, I'm saying that the last 14 years weren't good. When my employer denied all of its workers 7 hours of weekly overtime and compensated them with a 25-cent raise, I knew I had to make a change. When my boss forced me to fire a seasoned assistant who had worked with me for more than 10 years and who I had become a friend by then, following a Store of the Year style award, I realized something had to change. When they decided to stop providing service for the goods our customers were renting to own and to essentially fire all the service employees, I finally made a change, basically a small sub-company. I accepted a kind offer from a particular chain of gas stations to enroll in their store manager training program. Everything went well in the training facility. I would later come to the realization that I'm stupid, since things were barely getting by in an example store with well-seasoned employees and plenty of extra labor, the new manager trainees, on hand. Upon reaching the second phase, I was placed in a live store. Even though her assistant was pregnant and informed her that she wouldn't be returning after giving birth, the manager of the company decided not to replace her only assistant. In the best of times, working here was a nightmare. Whoa! One of the most important aspects of the job was that I had no idea how to operate the lottery machines because the store where I had trained for 3 months had a different cash station. Furthermore, they were, to put it mildly, unimpressed when I said, "Let's start by cleaning everything," in response to their question about how I would boost food sales from this gas station. And it was criminal how much work they expected of these minimum wage workers who were irregularly shifted. The list is endless. Greet guests, prepare meals, make coffee, stock refrigerators and aisles, count cigarettes, play lotto, count and receive stock, clean, and so forth. Eventually, I decided to call my DM and let him know that rather than working 13-hour days and never finishing anything, I had found a part-time job stocking at a fantastic grocery store close to my house. He says, "Well, we've spent a lot of money training you. We could make you an assistant manager and put you in another store." I clarified that my decision to not handle it was not a result of my inability to do so, and he had an epiphany. A few months later, this corporation converted everything that remained open into a franchise and closed all of its corporately owned stores in the state. I'm glad I made the right decision because 6 months later, I work 4 days a week at a machine shop and I'm happy with my life. What's your worst HOA homeowners association encounter you've had? Part 3. As a security guard at a homeowners association condo complex, let me share what I see. My workplace is situated on roughly 24 acres of land with more than 500 apartments and plenty of parking. Only a month ago, the president of the HOA instituted a new policy requiring us guards to tow vehicles with expired guest passes, 24-hour passes, that need to be renewed. We have always had a policy of calling residents and asking their guests to renew their passes as a courtesy, at least for the 2.5 years that I've been employed here. After a few hours, if they still didn't comply, we could tow. As it happens, during the last month, we have towed approximately 15 cars off the property, and each time we've done so, we've received verbal abuse, threats, and other forms of harassment from the resident or their guests. When the president finally learns of it, he attributes it all to our attempts to micromanage vehicles too much. This jerk is incapable of even owning up to the fact that he sickened us off with his tenants as if they were a personal grievance. I can't get into it all, there's just too much other S. Basically, the guy is just a total a-hole who puts the blame for everything on other people. About 4 years ago, one of my close friends inherited his grandparents' home. He made the decision to stay there while he made his decision about what to do with the house. He didn't really want to sell it because he had grown up in it. Less than a week following his move, he received a visit from a local committee. They identified themselves as the 3 HOA board members and said they were here to sign his membership paperwork. They were very impolite and inquisitive. One even attempted to enter the garage without first asking. He said, "I need to check your garage, if everything there is in order." When he stopped and asked where he wanted to go, "Every week I have the right to do this, and if you deny me access, you will be fined." Then, fed up with their bluster, he ejected them from the house. While he was doing this, one of the board members pushed some papers in his face and demanded that he sign them immediately. It would be his first week of residency, and these documents needed to be signed prior to his move-in. After they left, he looked over the documents. They granted the HOA rights that were un-effing real, and they were effing ridiculous. For instance, they were entitled to come by your house once a week to make sure, among other things, that you didn't store anything in your garage and that there was no gas or gasoline in any of the containers. Every week you had to mow your lawn and shovel snow every 2 hours, beginning at 5 in the morning. In addition to a ton of other nonsense, you were only allowed to park one car on your property other than in the garage. When they returned a few days later, they questioned him about why he hadn't signed the paperwork yet. They also desired to examine the garage once more. This time, he refused to let them in at all and declared that he would never join their foolish group. That meant war to them. In less than a week, they had sent him fines totaling over $1,000, some of which were for preventing them from entering his house. Each fine was $250. To put it plainly, my friend did not take them seriously and utilized their foolish letters to fuel his grill. Then the day arrived when they went way too far. When he returned, one of the board members had entered his garage without authorization, taken a seat, and was jotting down notes on his notepad. However, it wasn't even the worst aspect. In front of his house were 2 magnificent oak trees that he owned. His great-grandparents had planted them when they had just gotten married and moved into the house. They were being taken down by the HOA. For this, they had a professional crew called in. One had already sustained so much damage that it was essentially reduced to a stump. They had only recently begun with the other one. He really went crazy. He informed the tree crew that he was the owner and that what they were doing was strictly forbidden, telling them to stop right now. They were unaware of it since the board member had stated that these trees were against the rules because, according to him, too many leaves had fallen on the neighbor's garden. He had informed them that there was no legal justification for taking them down, but the board member insisted that I had given my approval because the trees were against HOA rules. Later, he did some research on it. There was a bylaw in place that required the owner of a garden to remove any offending trees within 2 weeks if their garden produced more than one 40-liter sack of leaves in that time frame. He offered them the chance to testify for him in court in exchange for him overlooking their trespassing. Then he reported the board members to the police for trespassing, breaking and entering. They had, in fact, broken into the garage with a bolt cutter. They had attempted to enter it twice previously, so he always kept it locked with a big effing bike lock. Must have been a glorious trial. They owed him money for the lock and the tree, which were both extremely valuable, nearly $50,000 if my memory serves me correctly, as well as damages for the second tree, for which he hired a professional arborist to ensure that all of the damage was repaired, an expense of almost $1,000 in and of itself. However, these idiots genuinely believed that the trial would have been unfair, so they attempted to challenge it, likely incurring an extra $10,000 in legal fees and court expenses. Overall, they must have spent more than $120,000 on this trial. He then sued them in civil court, claiming emotional distress. He genuinely went all out to tell them how much these trees meant to him. His great-grandparents had planted them using seeds from his native nation. In addition, he can't sleep at night because he constantly worries that the HOA will try to break into his house. In order for him to feel secure in his own house once more, the court truly purchased it and awarded him $500,000 in addition to the cost of a cutting-edge alarm system. Thus, in total, he nearly cost the HOA $750,000. In order for my friend to receive his money, they needed to file for bankruptcy and hire someone to audit the books. The finest comes last. The mediator discovered that these three jerks had been defrauding the HOA for more than a decade and were issuing as many fines as they could to support their income. To be able to reimburse my friend, all three of them had to sell their homes. He is now regarded by the majority of the residents as one of their favorites, and they frequently invite him over for barbecues and other get-togethers. As you can see, the majority of people never desired the HOA in the first place, but the board member effectively coerced them into signing the agreement by saying it would be mandatory, and then failing to do so would result in a $500 fine. Out of the more than 50 members, only 6 genuinely desired the HOA, though some believed they received a share of the action as compensation for watching their neighbors for infractions. If you want to watch the part 2, click the link here. We're very, very glad to see you all in the comments again. Many thanks for your support.